Welcome back to Movies Recapped. This one, we're doing My Friend Dahmer from 2017. Hope you enjoy.
The movie is based on the notorious American serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer, who executed 17 men and boys between the years of 1978 and 1991. The manners of his execution, which included mutilation, taxidermy, necrophilia, and cannibalism, make him one of the most cold-blooded serial killers in history. But in this movie, we're going to take a look at Dahmer's high school life back in the 80s, where evil began to take shape. At the start, a high school bus is taking some students home, in which Jeffrey Dahmer is also present. But unlike other students, he's isolated and keeps on staring outside the window. Suddenly, he notices an adult man jogging nearby and gets a feeling of fascination. Even after being dropped home, he keeps on staring at the man, as if he's become obsessed with him. Later, as Dahmer is cautiously carrying a plastic bag, two teens approach him. They ask him what's inside, to which Dahmer replies that he found a dead cat, which he will dissolve in acid. Since his father is a chemist, he has access to various chemicals, with the help of which he can conduct his experiments. The guys are weirded out by the process, but they nonetheless accompany Dahmer to his father's shed. There, Dahmer explains the process and mentions that he does so because he's interested in bones and anatomy. However, the boys think that he's simply pouring water to fool them. Hearing this, an enraged Dahmer breaks a jar containing roadkill that he had dissolved earlier. The animal starts emitting a foul stench, and as a result, the boys are grossed out. They then call Dahmer a freak before leaving the place. Following this, we're introduced to Dahmer's family. His father, Lionel, is a college chemist, while his mother, Joyce, is a housewife. The two always quarrel about small things, causing a negative impact on their children. Speaking of children, Dahmer has a younger brother, David, who is innocent but loud. Despite being rude to his wife, Lionel always supports his children and wishes for his elder son to be more social. At school, Dahmer is often bullied for being weird. He sits alone and sometimes steals preserved animals from the biology class. One day, when Lionel returns home after a hard day's work, he becomes enraged to find out that Dahmer is still obsessed with dead animals. In a fit of rage, he storms inside the shed and starts throwing all the preserved animals in the trash can. He also yells at Dahmer to make real friends and put an end to all this madness. The next morning at school, Dahmer tries to talk to a few of his classmates, but to no success. Later that day, as he's sitting by the road sad, he notices the same jogger from before and gets excited. At night, when he reaches home, Lionel apologizes for being harsh on him and gives him a pair of dumbbells. Dahmer takes up the suggestion and starts working out, but he also secretly continues his hobby of killing animals and collecting their bones. One day at school, a teacher finds Dahmer not paying attention and asks him a question. But the lazy Dahmer replies in a funny tone, much to the delight of everyone in class. Seeing all of them laugh, Dahmer realizes that it's his best chance to make friends. Hence, later in the hallway, he again starts making weird noises. He even pretends to have a seizure and makes a mockery out of himself on the floor. Surprisingly, the plan works, and a lot of people laugh at the act and find him cool. As days pass by, Dahmer continues acting this way to attract some people's attention. His hard work eventually pays off when one day a group of teenagers approach him at the cafeteria and ask him to sit with them. They are Durf, Mike, and Neil. In no time, the four form an inseparable bond and start coming up with epic pranks to liven up their senior year. In one instance, they make Dahmer make weird noises in the library, while in another instance, they run through the hallway pretending to have seizures. In this way, Dahmer's social life begins to improve, but his personal life is on a downward spiral. One day, when he reaches home, he finds out that his ex-drug addict mom is having a relapse. He tries his best to convince her to go to the hospital, but she doesn't listen. Disregarding this, Dahmer continues on with his life. One day, while fishing with his friends, he catches a fish and stabs it multiple times, claiming that he's interested in what's inside. This obviously freaks out the boys, but they opt not to confront Dahmer about it. Meanwhile, Dahmer also makes it a habit to hide behind some bushes on the road and stalk the male jogger. It appears as if he's become infatuated with the man. One day, through his friend Mike, he finally learns the man's identity. He is Dr. Matthews, a well-known physician in the area. That evening, he reaches home to again find his parents bickering. Shortly after, Lionel brings out a bottle of liquor to calm himself down, but the cunning Dahmer sneakily steals it. This is when he starts drinking alcohol. Over the course of the next few days, Dahmer arrives at school late and drunk. He also continues his hobby of killing animals and dissecting them to see their insides. A few days later, Dahmer and his classmates are taken to DC for a school tour. Dahmer is given a room with Charlie, the only black guy in class. Surprisingly, he asks his friend a very weird question: if his insides are the same as other people. As expected, Charlie is offended by the question, but he doesn't take action, probably because he's used to hearing racist insults. After Dahmer returns home from DC, his father picks him up and reveals devastating news. It turns out that Joyce and Lionel are getting separated, and the latter is planning to leave the house and stay in a motel for the time being. The news has a negative impact on Dahmer's psyche, and he has trouble sleeping that night. The next morning, Dahmer fakes a cold and finally meets his crush, Dr. Matthews. However, things take an awkward turn when the doctor finds out that the boy has an abnormal erection. After the checkup is cut short, Dahmer starts becoming even more depressed. He always keeps quiet when his friends discuss girls, implying that he's not interested in them. In this way, his parents' divorce, coupled with his strange sexual preference, starts making him go insane. With days passing by, he starts drinking heavily, even at school, much to the disgust of his friends. He gets even more devastated when one day his parents start fighting over his and David's custody. The next morning, while Dahmer's friends are having a party, some other classmates approach them and inquire about Dahmer. Durf mentions that he's been absent, but the other classmates assert that he's moved on after finding his friends boring. This triggers Durf, so he challenges his classmates that he can get Dahmer to perform one of his iconic seizure acts in a mall. Neil doesn't like the idea, but Durf couldn't care less about it. The next day, he bribes Dahmer and convinces him to perform the act at the mall. At the weekend, several boys head to the busy mall, and Dahmer starts acting like he's having seizures. The boys laugh at him, while one even records him on his camera. The act goes on for several minutes, and Dahmer makes a complete mockery of himself for the amusement of his friends. Once he's done, he finally realizes that his friends treat him like a zoo animal. To add to his troubles, when he reaches home, his mother informs him that she and Lionel have finalized their divorce, and that he has gained custody of their house. Everything happening around takes a deadly toll on Dahmer's mind, and one day he waits with a bat to beat up Dr. Matthews. Fortunately, the latter never shows up. As a result, Dahmer loses his patience and starts hitting a tree viciously until the bat breaks. Later that evening, as a couple of kids from the neighborhood stroll through the woods, they come across a deceased dog with all of its guts spilled out. The news quickly spreads across the town, and residents begin to assume that they have a psychotic person among them. The next day, all the students, including Dahmer's friends, are talking about the upcoming prom. Dahmer also wants to join in on the conversation, but Mike makes fun of him, mentioning that no girl would want to accompany a weirdo like him. Despite this, Dahmer does not lose hope and approaches a freshman girl named Bridget. He politely asks her out to the prom, but as expected, she refuses. But being the intelligent guy that he is, Dahmer makes up a rumor that if freshman girls go to the prom with senior boys, they automatically become popular. Bridget falls for the deception and immediately agrees. The next evening, the two awkwardly go to the prom, and Dahmer's friends are shocked to witness the sight. After a while, when Dahmer is getting some drinks for himself and Bridget, Neil approaches him and apologizes for the scene they created at the mall. Dahmer accepts the apology and heads back to Bridget. But when it's time to dance with her, he feels awkward and doesn't look her in the eye. It's clear that Dahmer is not interested in girls and has problems socializing with them. When he's had enough, he excuses himself and heads back to his car, where he eats alone. The following day, when Dahmer returns home, he finds his mother packing her belongings to leave. The sad thing is that she's also taking little David with her. Joyce tries to bid her elder son goodbye, but he doesn't respond and simply retreats to his home. There, he breaks down and starts throwing things. Soon, the graduation day arrives, and Lionel congratulates his son for the accomplishment. He also hands him the family car's keys, but Dahmer seems uninterested as he misses his mother a lot. One night, Durf finds Dahmer walking alone in the dark road and gives him a lift. Dahmer seems distraught and upset, and he also has strange blood marks on his hands. Scared, Durf questions him about it, but the psychotic boy simply replies that it's paint. Then the two start talking about friendship, but unlike Neil, the arrogant Durf refuses to apologize for treating his friend like a circus animal. This enrages Dahmer, and he cleverly invites him to his home for some beers. However, once both are inside, Durf gets freaked out when he finds Dahmer awkwardly close to him and decides to leave. On their way out, Dahmer grabs a baseball bat and attempts to hit his friend, but fortunately he doesn't. Soon, Durf gets in his car, and as he's about to drive away, he notices the baseball bat in Dahmer's hands. That night, Dahmer drinks excessively and gets paranoid about the fact that he was trying to assault his friend. He's scared that he's turning into a monster, but at the same time, the feeling of dominating someone and killing them gives him pleasure. Hence, the next morning, he gets in his car and drives away. On the way, he picks up a hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks, who accompanied Dahmer to his house on the 18th of June, 1978, but was never seen again. 13 years later, in July 1991, Dahmer was finally arrested for the murder of 17 men and boys.
That is one crazy bastard. Well, anyways, if you like that one, please consider subscribing, like, share, all that good stuff. Until next time, Woo signing out.